Welcome to this episode of Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. This time we're heading to Africa to explore why people go on safari. What can a few days in the bush open up? What does the space of the horizon change in our souls? As our guide, I've invited Barry Both, a former businessman turned ranger who works at one of the most magical lodges in South Africa, Londolozi. He is also one of the most stubbornly enthusiastic people I've ever met. Let's find out what the thrum of the savannah can teach us about finding happiness and about finding ourselves. What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katrina Valentin. Welcome, Barry. You currently work as a ranger in South Africa. How did you end up with that as your profession?
So, Kat, I have been obsessed with Africa and nature since I was a very small boy. And I still remember going on safari for, the first few times when I was only a few years old. We used to go to the Kruger National Park where my family and we would drive around in an old VW combi, as we call them here, or like a van. And you drive yourself into the Kruger National Park and you drive yourself around. You don't have a ranger ranger and tracker like we do at Londolozi. And those were some of my first sort of memories of driving around and looking at elephants and giraffe and lions. And I always just had this sort of affinity to the bush and to nature in general. And so right from a very young age, it was kind of always my dream. But it took me many years later before I actually sort of realized that dream.
So you went and worked in Europe for a while, right? In between?
Yeah, so after university, I went into the corporate world. So my idea at the time was that I would make millions and be able to buy my own piece of Africa. And so what I did was I moved to Luxembourg when I must have been about 23 or 24. And I went there for a 6-month work trip, an internship basically at Deloitte in Luxembourg. And 7.5 years later, I left Luxembourg. So there was quite a big hiatus between university and actually sort of realizing my dream of working in the bush and becoming a ranger. And during my time in Luxembourg, there were often moments where I thought, maybe I should just leave this corporate world and go be a ranger. But it took many years and many late nights of thinking about sort of going against the norm before I was actually able to basically have enough courage to kind of take the road less traveled, I guess. Look at it.
So what was it then? What was it that gave you the courage to break against the norm? Choose something different?
I think it came down mainly to working very late nights, many weekends when I was in Luxembourg. I was working in the tech world, and so there, I was never able to leave work at work. So I was always had my laptop with me. I was always able to work when you get home. When I went on vacation, I always had my laptop with me, and I would work on the plane or work in the car while one of my friends would drive. And so I think I kind of just got to a point where I thought, surely there's a little bit more to life than just working. And I was very lucky that during my time in Luxembourg, I did travel a lot. So it wasn't all doom and gloom, as you say. I had an incredible time while I was there, and I learned an incredible amount while working in the corporate world. But it was, once I decided I needed to take a break, I then took a 2 year sabbatical, which even now when I think back on it, I feel very fortunate enough to have had that opportunity. And the whole purpose of that 2 year sabbatical was to kind of figure out that what made me tick, what was it that I really wanted out of life. And so I basically sold or gave away all of my things in Luxembourg, packed a backpack and a surfboard and a snowboard, and I basically hit the road, and I went traveling. And my whole objective, like I said, was to try and figure out myself and what really made me happy. And so it was only really at the end of those 2 years that I then realized, actually, maybe it's the bush, maybe it's this dream I had as a kid that I always wanted to sort of realize. And yeah, so it took me 2 years of basically trying to figure myself out to eventually have the courage to kind of take that leap of faith.
And that leap led you to Londolozi, which is this truly unique, magical lodge in the Greater Kruger Park, a family run place that's been around since the 1920s. And the word Londolozi, the name, means, if I remember this correctly, the protector of all living things.
The best ways that I could try and describe what Londolozi means to me is that there's a familiarity of coming home, this sort of feeling of when you drive through the gates and you arrive home, that there's this familiar feeling. But at the same time, there's a feeling of unfamiliarity where you'll drive around and not know what's around the next corner. So there's this certain excitement that you get of not knowing, yet knowing the reserve as well as we get to know it by, we have to learn all the roads and we know all of the different areas of where you would go looking for animals, but you never really know what you're going to find. So it's this perfect sort of mix of knowing and feeling familiar and at home, yet each day is different and each game drive is different and unique. And I always tell guests, it was actually when I first was going to be moving to a life in the bush, a lot of my sort of friends said to me, aren't you going to get bored with just driving guests around or just going on a game drive every day, every morning, every afternoon? And now when I talk to those friends again and I say to them, the number of permutations that we have in terms of the different guests that you'll have on a vehicle and the different roads that you could drive, over a traversing area of 15,000 hectares, there's so many different options and so many different permutations of what you're going to see and what people you're going to have on your vehicle, that each and every day is equally as exciting as the previous one.
So one thing that you and I've talked a lot about when I've been visiting Londolozi is the energetics of a game drive and how people in the car interacts with the animals and with the bush and with the ranger and the tracker and really with the whole trajectory of a drive.
I think that there's a certain amount of healing or of learning that people experience while watching other animals. So there's a hypothesis by I forget his first name, but I think it's Richard Wilson. I might be wrong on the first name, and he hypothesized that humans are happier people simply by watching other species go about their day. So it's called the biophilia hypothesis. And so seeing different people from different walks of life watching animals do their thing, which we're very fortunate at Londolozi that we have incredible wildlife experiences that basically blow people's minds. But at the same time, there are long periods of stillness in between those crazy sightings where it's often just you and your thoughts staring out into the sort of wilderness looking for what the next animal might be. And I think that those moments in between seeing animals are equally as important as of actually observing them. I think that people generally leave being very or much happier versions of themselves after safari. Touching on the energy aspects, I personally have been very fortunate that I've always had great guests, and I think that the interaction between guests on a vehicle, on a game drive vehicle, is equally as important as seeing the wildlife. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're from, whether you're a successful investment banker from New York, or you run your own little boutique store down in Cape Town. Everyone is there for the same reasons. They're looking for incredible experiences with nature, and the game drive vehicle is almost like the great equalizer, where everyone on the vehicle, it doesn't matter what walk of life you are, you've all got something in common to talk about, and we end up with a lot of people that have bonds for life, or friendships that they have for life because of coming on a safari and meeting someone from a totally different part of the world, yet you get along like a house on fire. So I think that equally so, that's as incredible to witness as some of the sightings that we get to see.
Hey, you know how you were saying that Londolozi gave you that sense of coming home? And one of the things that I've noticed is that just after a day, there is a sense of deep relaxation that occurs, and the phone is less important. You don't want to check your work emails. You don't really want to call anyone either. You just want to be, not do. And that sense of belonging to the earth starts to show up.
I think we, as humans, we often try to sort of exclude ourselves from the ecosystem. So, I think particularly when you go on a walk, and in the reserve or anywhere out in nature, you feel a lot more in tune or in touch with what's going on around you. Not to say that you don't feel that when you're out on a game drive, but particularly when you can feel the earth beneath your feet, you can stop and put your hand on the trunk of a tree. You can smell the flowers. You can see the animals looking at you, paying different attention to you because you're walking as opposed to being on a vehicle. And I think that is one of the aspects that makes you feel a lot more grounded and sort of part of the ecosystem and part of nature. But then there's a certain part of belonging to not only the nature, but to the whole community. And so we're very fortunate at Londolozi to have a pretty incredible community that we are surrounded by, that we're also part of, that we live with. We all, I often get asked by guests, where's home? And Londolozi is home for me. I don't have another house in a different part of the country or anything like that. So that essentially is home, and we all protect that quite strongly. We want to make sure that we all believe in each other, and we all we all back each other. And so coming to Londolozi as a guest, it's also a case of being welcomed into the family. So, as any guest that comes to Londolozi, you are already at that point and will forever be part of the family. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we still, I still talk to a lot of the guests that have come to Londolozi, even if it's for a few days, and they get off back to whichever part of the world that they live in, because you share these incredible moments together, whether it's in a sighting or sitting around the fire, talking about different things that have happened during the course of the day. We also spend a lot of time together. If you think of just being out on a game drive in the morning, one in the afternoon, spending time sitting around the fire at night, like I say, you spend a long time together. And so the sort of relationships that you build are quite strong. And so there's a certain sense of belonging that you get simply by nature of being around others and being around each other, that you wouldn't necessarily get in too many other sort of industries or walks of life.
Yeah, that is so true. Another thing that struck me when I was there was how the excitement, in lack of a better word, the excitement of the chase really makes people come alive. The first time I visited with my teenage daughter, we went out the very first morning and we were lucky enough to start following these wild dogs around, chasing them as they were chasing their prey. And she dropped her phone and she didn't even care. She just went, keep going, keep going, keep going. And that sense of aliveness, that's something we don't always find in our everyday life.
Dopamine is one of the most important chemicals for us to feel happy. And one of the best ways to get it is to put in effort before you get the reward, which nowadays we just get the reward without the effort. And so inherently in us, you need to have that search and pursue in whatever it is, putting in the effort to learn a new language, not just thinking you can get something without putting in the effort. And so I think that that's built into us to make us feel happier. And that's why people nowadays aren't necessarily as happy, because we just get this instant gratification on things. Whereas, so the bush can really teach you how to look for something and how to put in effort. And only then do you get the reward. And it just makes you feel so much better about life in general. And so that's certainly one of the things that, the lessons that you can learn from being out on a safari.
As part of your ranger training at Londolozi, when you begin to work there, you do something called the Character Week, which I find fascinating. What was the most surprising thing you learned about yourself during that week?
There's a huge part of our training that sort of finds the best way to get the most out of each individual. And at the end of the day, I think what it teaches you is that you need to be yourself. And we're a team, not just in the ranger team, but in all different spheres of Londolozi. Everyone is there because they are their own unique individual, and they bring their own characteristics and attributes to the table. So you want to have a team that is made up of different personalities that can bring out the most and the best in each other. So I think we're very lucky in our team that we do have a nice mix of different personalities, and which makes it interesting as well to keep learning from each other. Some of us might be somewhat more inclined to be interested in birds or in mammals or in trees or whatever the case may be, and so we get to learn a lot from each other pretty much on a daily basis. And that includes also the trackers. So we get to learn an incredible amount from trackers that have been, they've been in the bush, some of them for more than 30 years. So you can imagine the amount of information that they have to impart when you sort of take the time to spend with them and to ask them questions. I think one of the things that I learned during the whole training period is that nothing worth anything becomes easy. So you sometimes need to put in the hard yards to really, or you need to be pushed. And I think stretch is good. It's good to stretch yourself and to push yourself to a point where you think you might not break, but you think, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to be capable of doing this. And then it's like the first time you do anything. I remember the first time doing an endurance race. When you're training, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be fit enough or I'm going to be able to do this. And after the first half marathon or triathlon or whatever it is that you've done, the next one seems so much easier. So once you've summited the peak, it makes it a lot easier to think you can get there again. And so I think that's probably the thing I learned the most about our training was that, push. You got to push yourself, and nothing worth anything comes easy.
Well, you have this amazingly contagious enthusiasm for the bush that's apparent to anyone who meets you. What is it about living in the bush that makes you love it so much?
There's nothing like sitting around a fire at night and hearing the sort of whooping call of hyenas or a lion roaring that really calls to your primal instinct. And to be able to go and explore a wilderness area and not knowing what's around the corner means that each and every game drive is one of the best adventures. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's one specific sighting or one specific moment that's far better than the rest, because each and every one of those moments of silence between sightings, or watching a lion walk right past you for the very first time, or seeing a leopard up in the tree for the very first time, each one of those are equally as important to the whole sort of adventure as sitting around the fire, seeing a dazzle of zebras running across the open savanna. They're all part of the whole adventure and part of the experience that makes Africa totally unique in my perspective. One of the biggest things for me is the search and pursue. It's the dopamine that you get from looking for something, and then when you find it, like you get so excited, and you get to do that every single drive. It's not like that'll never get old. It's like a daily treasure hunt. It's not this case of, oh well, that was because every drive there's a new treasure hunt, and the clues are always going to be different, and it's impossible to ever get bored with that. It's like if you like puzzles or games or whatever, and it's every day someone's giving you a new game. It's just so fun. And so that for me is there's a certain how safari can help you. Is a case of yes, you're going to be getting better sleep. You're going to be waking up early in the morning to watch the sunrise. You're going to be going to sleep around, you're going to watch the sunset, and you're going to have a better sort of wake sleep cycle. But for me, the real power about like being on a safari is that like search and pursue of you desperately want to see this leopard or this lion, and you go out on your game drive and you find tracks of it, and then okay, I'm going to head off in this direction to try and find where these tracks are leading, and then you hear monkeys making an alarm call, and then impalas, and you've got a different vehicle that you radioing to say, you go check here, I'm going to check here. And when you actually find it, it's this incredible sort of like release of dopamine that you get that just makes you want to come back for more. Like it's something that you can never get enough of. And I think that for me is what like really makes a safari sort of what you get addicted to them. And I suppose that's probably the Londolozi effect for me, is that whole search and pursue, which will get me wanting to come back more and more.
Well, it's definitely worked on me. I keep coming back, and every time it's such a wondrous gift, and it stays with you. It seeps into your life as this sense of belonging. So, what is next for you? What do you see as your future? Would you ever go back and work in an office again?
I think that when you are happy in a place and happy in a job, you don't ever really think about uh, what else there is out there. But the one thing I can say is that I am a far happier person and a far happier version of myself, having chosen a life out in nature as I ever was in the corporate world. And so I can't picture a scenario where I leave Londolozi and working out in nature for any job where I have to sit in an office again.
I love that. A happier version of yourself. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for coming on, Barry, and exploring with us. And if anybody listening would like to know more or visit Londolozi, you can go to londolozi.com and find out everything you need to know on that brilliant website.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katrinavalentin.com/wolf.